Hi, Juan.
Hey Kurt, how are you?
I'm well. How you doing?
I'm doing good. So
Good.
this is my first time doing one of these via Zoom, and
Hmm.
I'll have to see how it goes. Let's see. We want to have both of us. There we go. So that way I can see you, you can see me. And what I'm going to do is have you kind of give me a quick synopsis of, your use of AI. You're an author. Tell us about your books. And then we'll get into discussion about some of the videos that you and I have seen, and then shared with each other and where all this AI stuff is going. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Sounds like fun.
This is my friend Kurt Bell, who's my colleague at Riverside County IT Group. And he's
Hey, Juan.
also, hey, he's also the author of Going Alone. And as I understand, you have another book in the works, or there's actually two titles that have been published.
So I have a couple of books out and working on a new one now, but it's with my new collaborator, the Softy Papa AI. So I'm the editor, the AI is the writer.
Softy Papa AI. And Softy Papa is your handle for Instagram and Facebook, right?
That's right. That's my persona online, basically.
There you go. So, all right. So, tell us a little about your books.
Sure. So the books that I write are largely autobiographical in to the extent that they cover the course of my life, but with regard to the experiences that I've had, mostly in the wilderness, and the reflection that I've had on life itself, and how I've used it to improve my own life. So I've written a couple of books along those lines. And I basically they're more or less cautionary tales to those that might not want to have to stumble where I've stumbled in my 60 odd years. But lately, I've kind of changed a direction just a little bit. I'm still writing on my own, still my fingers at the keyboard. But now with the arrival of AI, I've realized that that's a new and interesting and alternative venue for creativity. And what I'm using it for are for the projects that I've wanted to do that I knew I would never have the time to do. So I'm leveraging AI to help me to achieve those ends, which I would never do on my own.
Interesting. I know that you really when I started, showing you some of the things like Chat GPT, and this was what about 5, 6 months ago.
Probably, yeah, about right. Yeah.
I mean, you really jumped in on it. I was very impressed. I mean, you definitely started to play around with it, and just for the audience, what are the titles of your books?
So I have a couple of different books. One of them is called the first book that I'll give them in order of publication. So the first is called No More Looking Out for Number One. That's the first of a three-part series. And then I have another one called Going Alone, which is part two of that series. And then a third book called The Good Life, which is part three. And that Good Life is written, but it's still being edited, so it hasn't been published yet. I also have a book called Freeway Bible Study, which is a skeptic's ride through the Bible. So it was my deep study study of the Bible over a 2-year period, and my thoughts and ideas relative to that from a skeptic's and non-believer's perspective. And so that's it. And then I also have a series of books that are blog entries, compiled blog entries under the Stoic Poetry series.
Oh yeah, you're really prolific, Kurt. I didn't realize you wrote that much. I knew about Going Alone, and I knew that there was at least one other book, and then you had mentioned one that you're using AI to kind of craft. So,
Yeah.
what?
Five books on my own so far. One book coming down the AI book is already finished. I'm just doing a little bit of tweaking and editing now. It's all done.
Wonderful. And the ones that have been completed, they're available on Amazon.
Yeah, you can get them on Amazon under the Kurt Bell. You can also find them on my website, goingalone.org. And
Wonderful.
they're also for free on goingalone.org. You can just read them there right there.
Oh, well, there you go. So if you don't want to spend money, you can still get your thoughts, opinions, and ideas, and you know,
You
and
bet.
and what impresses me the most is you've crafted kind of like your own principles to live by.
I have, yeah, right. I distilled out of one of the things that the going alone is all about is not about living life alone necessarily. It's about going into the wilderness, into the deep wilderness alone, confronting the emptiness that can be found out there, and then realizing, well, now what, right? And
Okay.
so it was that now what moment that caused me to come back. The punchline to going alone is the coming back part, the coming back and realizing, well, if I'm on my own, so to speak, if no one's going to hold my hand in the universe, then it's going to be up to me to craft some values, some objectives, and some principles to live by, to live a good and meaningful life. And so I developed what I call the Good Life Creed. The Good Life is a nod to the Stoic tradition. So the Good Life Creed is a collection of 8 objectives and 34 principles that I use to guide my life, so that I can be the best man that I possibly can in the time that I have remaining.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so on your latest book, you tell us about the process that you started down. I know that you've given a couple entries on social media about it.
So the AI book you're referring to?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, so that one was a really work of excitement, and it's been a heck of a lot of fun. So here's the basic idea. So I had done 3 books in the Going Alone series that I mentioned before. And what I realized was that I wanted to tell little vignette stories out of that, because I did my adventure. My adventure consisted of going deep alone into the wilderness in both the mountains of Japan and the California desert, and basically having, Joseph Campbell's hero's tale, right? Going out, having the experience and coming back and building something of that motif, right? And I realized that after I'd had that of my own in real life, and I had written the story, that there was an opportunity to make little vignettes, like going alone tales, right? Going alone stories that would be little stories along those lines. But I knew I would never do it because I'm so busy with so many other projects. But with AI on the scene, I realized I could do it. So what I did, if I can, shall I go ahead and give you some of the
Please,
process?
please, please. This is one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you today. I want people to see what AI can do for you.
Well, great. Well, to start off with, AI when you first start off when prompting it, it won't know you from a hole in the ground, right? So if you start talking about it, say, write like me, it doesn't know who you are, so it won't do that. Now, you can train it a little bit. If you tell it a little bit about yourself, you can take on your persona and begin to write like you. Even better, if you have documents that you've written, maybe blog posts or even letters that you've written, you can upload that to the AI and ask it to read that and take on that persona. The more information you give it about yourself, the more the AI knows about you, and it can begin to write like you. Now, if you are someone that has actually published anything on the internet, blog posts, books that are available on Amazon. In my case, I have a website, like I said, where I've published my books. They actually can be read on the website. Then you've got a huge head start when it comes to AI, because as long as your publications, if you're doing with ChatGPT, for example, as long as your publications were out there before September 2021, then it's quite likely that ChatGPT already knows who you are. You just simply have to remind it who you are. So
Wow.
imagine my surprise when I first started using ChatGPT, and I asked it one day, said, have you ever read the book Going Alone, or do you know the book Going Alone? And it says, yes, Going Alone, written by Kurt Bell. And then it gave me a short summary. I was like, whoa, you know who I am, right? Guess what? It's read all my stuff, everything that's published out there. It knows me deeply, right? Because it knows the stories. Now, if that's the case, then you are well, as an author or a writer of any sort, you're well underway to use AI as a lever to augment your work using your writing style, because AI has an incredible ability to emulate. If anyone out there is watching this and you haven't tried the emulation capability or the persona capability, you can ask most of the big AIs out there to, for example, write like Shakespeare or write like the King James Bible, and you will be astonished at the similarity of that. Yeah. So what I did, once I realized that was the case, and that that the AI could write like me, and I quizzed it, I gave it some questions, asked it some questions that only someone that really knew my book could know, and it knew the answers. And then more astonishing was when I asked it to summarize Going Alone, which I think is a really rather esoteric book and maybe a little bit dense in some ways. And it got everything perfect. It understood the point of the book, the message, the mission. And I was like, wow, it was a sort of validation in a way that the book wasn't that my message was there. So when I was all in the place, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm in place now that I can use this AI to write as me. Now, I, of course, would not want to be disingenuous and would never put the name Kurt Bell to anything that wasn't written by me. That's when I came up with the idea to have the moniker Softy Papa AI. Softy Papa being a tap to my online presence, adding the AI to the end, is strong hint is obviously saying this is the AI. So I then began to work with ChatGPT and said, okay, we're going to do some work together. Yes, Lon.
Which version of ChatGPT are you working with?
What a great question. And so 3.5 is what I started off with. And then I had been hearing that 4.0 was an order of magnitude better. So I gave it a try. And that sold me. It is indeed. It's the difference. I say it's the difference between watching a roller coaster, watching people on a roller coaster with 3.5 and riding on a roller coaster yourself with 4.0. It's that big a difference. But in addition, there are extra features that you get with 4.0 that are well worth it as well. 4.0. And for anybody out there that doesn't want to put out the $20 a month for 4.0, go ahead and just use Bing AI. It's free and it's powered by 4.0.
Wow.
But it does have a little drawbacks. There's one big powerful feature in ChatGPT that I'm going to mention real quickly. That is the ability to preload the AI with query information. If you go down into your settings, you'll find you'll have two 1,500 character blocks where you can front load the AI queries with anything you want. That as an author is really helpful because then you can carefully craft those blocks of text so that whenever you start a new query, you're off to the races, working exactly as you want to work.
Wonderful. So this process that you went through, you basically got AI to be familiar with your work, so it understood your style, probably understood the concepts that you wanted to convey.
Yes.
And then
scarily so, it understood the concepts in a frighteningly accurate way.
Right. And that's been some of the complaints, back in the early days when ChatGPT broke out, I guess about, almost a year ago, that it would hallucinate. So it basically, if it didn't know something, it would make it up, But in your case, it nailed it to the wall.
It nailed it not only so hard to the wall, it reverberates. Like, for example, I keep these long sessions open. And like I said, I use these 1,500 character sessions to start things. Days will go by and we'll be having a conversation and it will bring up an answer and it will cite some reference to an obscure concept within one of my books that spot on nailed it. And I'm like, where did you come up with? You were out of the nowhere that it did that.
See, yeah, this is what spooks a lot of people. So this new book, what is this new book that you're using this process on? What's it about? What's it?
That's a great question. Thank you. So here's here's the vision that I had. Okay, I thought I had my own Joseph Campbell hero's tale story, so to speak, right? And I thought I can make vignettes. So I told it, I said, I don't even have to tell it. I said, hey, regarding going alone, I would like to come up with I told the AI this. I would like to come up with some short stories that would be other people's tales of going alone, similar to this. Can you give me some ideas? And right away, it came up with a whole concept for it. It said, we'll make little short vignettes. How about this, Kurt? It suggested this to me. It said, how about, because my books are out there and they're all hardbound edition. I said, how about if people stumble across your book in the future and they read it and then they decide to have their own experiences like that? They decide to go alone on their own. And
this is the AI's idea?
Yes, this was the AI.
Whoa.
And it said, we can tell short stories of people who have found your book and their experiences and stories.
Whoa. Now, did you have to prompt it with what type of characters we're going to be telling these stories, or basically it generated the characters too?
It generated everything. It came up and it said, how about here's a dozen ideas, story ideas. And it gave me an example of the first one and fleshed it all out, and it was all done. And I had required no changes or edits on my part. I mean, the story wasn't done at that point, but that's another level.
Right. Okay. So this process that you've been going through, how long ago did you start? And you said you're almost done. You're basically doing tweaks at this point.
Yeah. So okay. So if anybody that's ever written a book knows that the writing part is hard, but the editing is even harder. Right? So
Yeah.
taking it from a rough finished product. I mean, it's hard enough to type it out, but then to get it to the point that you actually want to show it to people, that's a whole other thing altogether. So I'm in that latter portion right now. We were done with the initial draft of the first edition, the first one of these, within about 2 hours. And I've been working on the editing for about 3 weeks now.
So some of the implications is, and this we're going to kind of diverge into some of the discussions that have been taking place and online about the impacts of AI. One of the big disruptors is this whole Hollywood strike with not only the actors, but the writers. And what you've just told me is they've got a big bullseye on their back.
Oh, I think so. Yes.
Now, if they're astute enough, they'll leverage this tool, but definitely the producers and the people that are the money-making machine, they have their sights on cutting them out altogether. So we don't need a union, we don't anything. We'll just use AI. And the producer will basically come up with a concept. Hey, tell me a story about this guy who goes out into the wilderness and there's nothing out there, and tell me from different people's points of view what happens to him.
And by the way, write it in the story, write it in the style of Jack London.
There you go. So, and it'll do it. And it does it quickly. And it does it in such a way that you have something to start off with if you need to craft it.
Right. That's right. Now you've nailed the point right there when you hit the word when you said the word start off. So you might be wondering why did I say it took 2 hours to write it, not 2 minutes? There's a reason.
Okay. Oh, wait a second. Hold on. I was under the impression the book, AI was generating this in 2 hours, but it generated the first starting point in minutes. And then it took you a couple hours to kind of go through and
right.
Well, let's take this out and change this. Now, when you were doing that, were you doing like a manual edit, or were you prompting the AI to make the changes?
I was prompting the AI to make the changes. I strictly reserve my role as the editor. The AI does all the writing. All I'm doing is adding seasoning to the chili.
Whoa, dang, that's intense. That's
so
really
yeah,
intense.
It really is. It's especially when you mess up and you make a mess of things and you realize the only way to fix it is to let AI get back at it and remove you from the picture.
Whoa.
So let me explain why it took 2 hours to have something satisfactory rather than 2 minutes, because it was done in 2 minutes. Okay. So this problem that I'm going to describe to you now will probably go away within a couple of iterations or a short period of time, especially once we have this becomes more mainstream and really people start paying for the tool for dedicated purposes like this. So the AI that we're dealing with right now, let's stick with ChatGPT 4.0. It has a limit of about, I think it's about 30,000 tokens. So token, think of a token as a word fragment, right? It's a word and a space, because we have to have spaces between the words. So that's basically what it is. So think of it about 30,000 words that it can operate with in its memory at any one time, so to speak. There's another AI out there called Claude AI that has it has 100,000 tokens. So if you want to use an AI that can do more in its memory, try Claude out. But Claude isn't as good as ChatGPT. It's like having a writer that can do more, but it's not as good a writer as 4.0. So that's why I stick with.
Do you use them both? I mean, will you like start something in one and then push it over to the other, or vice versa?
No, because I'm just not satisfied with Claude yet. It's just not. You put them head to head, ask them to do the same creative, like have do a haiku contest, right? Have both of them write a haiku on the same subject, and you'll be blown away by You'll like ChatGPT's results more than Claude.
Interesting.
And that then filters down everything you do. If you're doing something creative, you want the most creative, right?
Yes.
Oh, by the way, when you're doing this with ChatGPT, it has 3 settings, right? Like, do you want me to write like a very conservative manner, medium, or creative? Choose the more creative. Choose the one you want, right?
Right, and that's Bing's interface, right? Where they have those 3 choices. Yeah. I saw that. And when I've used ChatGPT, I've tried it with a write up for one of my episodes, and I said, write it like, and it gave me I just gave it the raw text, here's what I want you to write about it. I wrote it out and I said, now write it like a skeptic, like somebody is kind of skeptically hard-nosed. And then that was a little too far. And I was able to basically give it another style in between the two. And it was just amazing how quickly it adjusted.
Well, it's amazing, but it's all context, right? And it has the context of every writer that's been out there before September, that's been published on the internet before September of 2021.
That's a lot.
Let me tell you though about why I had to take it from 2 minutes to 2 hours. And by the way,
I hijacked you there.
that's all right. That's all right. So it would have taken me. It actually is more than 2 hours. It just I had to go for that day. I had to go for a dog walk with my wife. So here's what happened. When it first came up with the story, I said, go for it. And it came up with this great idea for a story. It said, how about a copy of your book Going Alone, Kurt? And here's a copy right here.
Okay, I wanted you to show the audience your book. Yeah.
So copy, because it's nice and hardbound, right? So it's going to last for a while. Copy of this survives in my family 3 generations out. So and this is ChatGPT came up with this story. My great-great-granddaughter, Aya, my wife's Japanese, so it's a Japanese name, finds a copy in the family archive somehow, reads it, and reads the story of her great-great-grandfather's.
But this is Emily's grandkid.
This is Emily's kid's kid.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a couple down there, and is inspired by reading her great-great-grandfather's story to then have an adventure of her own, which leads her to actually become a stellar explorer, right, in a starship, right? So anyway,
you just came up with the starship thing, right? Just out of the blue.
The whole AI is the whole thing's AI's idea, right? And so then it said, and she's going to go out, she's going to go alone, because in my book, I go deep into the desert alone, have my epiphany, and then come back.
But you did that for real. I mean, you would go into this place out in the middle of the Mojave that's completely desolate, and it's just like animals there. I mean, you were
and I gave names to all the places and all the concepts, right? There's the great indifference, the emptiness beyond, I call the desert killers, or the heat and the cold, and all these different names that I came up with. And the AI, because it knew all of this, it wove this all into the story that it wrote to say that Aya was going out and experiencing and searching and discovering the great indifference, encountering the killers, etc. It blew my mind. But so anyway, it did this. So it had this is the theme of the story. And I said, go for it. 2 minutes later, it produced a story, and it blew my socks off. It was perfect. I went out, I walked to my wife. I said, you can't believe what the AI just did. It wrote my book again. And it did the whole thing. Here was the problem though. It wasn't a book. It was a short story, about 30 pages.
Okay.
And I struggled. I was like, well, this isn't long enough for a book, right? This makes a pretty good short story in an anthology or something like that, or maybe a long blog post, but it's not a book. And I struggled and I struggled and I struggled to try to make it longer. And here's where I started fumbling. I would tell it, for example, okay, this first chapter is great, but can you make it a little bit longer? And the AI will hallucinate. It'll try to please you, but it doesn't always give you the results. And it would go out and sure, I'd do it again. It would do it again. And it would be about the same length. Until I realized I was running into that context limit problem.
Wow.
It couldn't hold more than the 30,000 tokens in its memory, right? So it was a hard limit that I was encountering. Now, I could have given the story to Claude, because Claude can do more, and Claude could have written it longer for me, but then I would be dealing with a lower quality writer. Get it?
Yeah, but here's my question to you. If Claude is more verbose or has more tokens, if you started with Claude and then fed that to ChatGPT and said, look, Claude's got it's more footage, for lack of a better word, and think in terms of a film, you need to improve the quality and make it more like I write. Would that have worked?
No. Here's the reason. I don't know for sure, because each of these AI, these are generated by different companies, right?
Right.
I don't know how they were trained or they were developed, but if I had to say, if we're using ChatGPT as a scale with 3.5 and 4.0, I would say Claude and 4.0 is an order of magnitude above 3.5. I would say Claude is probably about a 3.7.
Okay, he's in between the two. Gotcha.
That's the problem, right? It's like you look at it and you're like, gosh, I know you could do better. This is good, but it ain't as good as Chat GPT can do. And
Okay.
I don't want that, right? I want the best.
Absolutely.
So that was the challenge then. That's why it's taken me 3 weeks. I had to figure out, how am I going to build this, this 30-page short story into a 100-page book without losing the quality by giving it to Claude. Get it?
Yeah. So how did you accomplish that?
So it was a lot of trial and error, and a lot of frustration. But I'll just nutshell it for your viewers. Basically, what it came down to was trial and error, to the point that I finally realized that I could trust the AI to keep the context of the whole story. Right, that was the thing. I wanted it to kind of at least know the summary of the whole story. And then what I started doing was feeding it paragraph after paragraph and saying, take this paragraph and elaborate this paragraph.
So you spoon fed it.
I spoon fed it, right? But that had a dead end too. So that's the second effort I did. So I went through and I gave it one paragraph after another, said, make this better, make it more verbose, add more dialogue. And you'll love this. Since I was dealing with philosophy, and it's based on Stoic philosophy, I said, wherever you can, and Aya wasn't alone. She's got this Stoic AI that runs the ship, and that's a tutor.
Very cool.
And I said, add the Stoic AI to put quotes from real Stoic philosophers at suitable points for Aya to think about, and it did that. So I took it then, I took it. I built it paragraph after paragraph. I went through the whole book and built each paragraph to maybe 2, 3, 4 paragraphs.
But that's how you expanded it.
Right. But then, and I was really happy at the end. I wound up with 116-page book. Okay. until I read, until I read it, loved it until I read it.
As a book, not paragraph by paragraph.
Right. And it was beautiful. The first chapter was stunning, blew my socks off. Because I did some tweaking to it along the way. I added it. I said, you knew how to write like me. I said, the way I was trying to get it to write longer, I asked to write descriptive elements like John Steinbeck would write, beautiful descriptive elements like scenes. And I actually gave it a chapter 1 of The Grapes of Wrath, which is John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath studies goes between setting to dialogue, chapter after chapter. I gave it chapter 1. And I said, I want you to enhance the book with beautiful imagery like this. So it did it. And it had these incredible star scenes, going through these fields and described like John Steinbeck would do. And it was great until I realized that's all it was doing. I got about into the 4th chapter and I was like, oh my gosh, all it did was basically just it just threw a bucket of paint on the thing.
So then what did you do?
Okay, so then I was really, really frustrated at that point because I felt I had messed it all up, right? I had broken it all. So I did 2 things in turn. The first thing I did was I sat down and I made a long and hard thought about a query. Oh, by the way, this is really important for your viewers to keep this in mind. I had one AI session running the whole time. All of this happened in one session. So what that means is if you use ChatGPT or other AIs, you can have a different sessions running, right? And if you keep the session running, when you come back to it tomorrow, it remembers everything you've done and you're keeping a conversation going. If you start with a new session, you lose all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was using the same session. So I went back to 2 things I did. The first thing I did was I went back and I deconstructed the damage that I'd done, right? I'd fed it back in and gave it to it and said I gave it prompts about how I want it to clean it up and make it concise. And it brought it back to about the 30-page book that it was before, and it read well. Now I realized I had a problem. And this is where the really interesting collaboration came in. The problem was that I couldn't get past the limit without the AI going nuts in directions that I didn't want it to do. I had to begin editing at a more of a sentence by sentence structure than a paragraph by paragraph one. And I started reading each paragraph and I think to myself, okay, now how can we change this in some way to make it more interesting? And I would give it explicit instructions to make changes, small changes that would add detail that only the human author could really think about. And this is where I began to feel like I still had a place in the world as a writer.
Okay, so your role now is to like add the pieces of detail with just a little more oversight than you did before.
Right. Here's a prime example. Okay. The AI used the word soul throughout the book. Right now,
SOUL.
SOUL, right. So it would say that, Aya would be at the edge of the black hole and then watching the stars, the stars in the background, ringed by the black hole would fill her soul with rapture, right? As a skeptic, I didn't want to use the word soul. I wanted to use something like spirit or something else, not soul, right?
Entity.
So I told,
yeah.
What? Yeah,
okay.
whatever.
What word did you end up using? Or did
whatever. In some ways, I looked up, I went into this, I asked AI, I got another session going, and I said, can you give me some alternatives to soul? And it gave me words, and I used those. And then I told it, okay, so rewrite this. Let's take out the word soul and add something else. And I said, and while you're at it, can you maybe add a couple of ideas about this, that, and the other thing? And then it would rewrite the paragraph, make it more in alignment with my own thinking, and then add those other elements in, and now we're off to the races. I was adding creativity and alignment with my own thinking that made the writing more what I wanted.
Wow. And so you're in the final stages of this.
It's written. I'm up to.
When do you have it? Huh?
I'll just finish this piece off. I'm up to 86 pages now, and it's 86 pages. I'm really pleased with the results now. It is not dull and repetitive without like it was when it was just a bucket of paint at the wall. It's deep. It's got conversation, dialogue, quotes, and it's deeply reflective of going alone.
Wonderful. So that's been great, Kurt. I've never realized all the effort that you put in, not only in crafting the book, but learning how to use these new tools. I mean, that in itself is a learning thing. So we're going to take a little break and shoot over, to the next link. And then let's talk about some of the things that we've seen in, YouTube and whatever about some of the experts that have been talking about AI. And I'm gonna chime in with some of the stuff that I've seen just in the past 6 months. It's astounding how fast this is moving.
All right.
So we'll come right back, and stay tuned, gang, because this is going to be, I think, a better part of the discussion.
We're flipping the album over.
We're flipping. Yeah, going to the B-side. See you in a bit. And we're back with Kurt Bell, author of No More Looking Out for Number One, because there's more to life than living. Going Alone, and the Freeway Bible Study, and the soon to be published. Do you have a title yet?
Sure, The Good Life.
The Good
Life. You mean the AI book or
the AI? Yeah,
the AI book is called Cosmic Voyager.
Cosmic Voyager, and also The Good Life, which is your authoring, and then the Cosmic Voyager is the AI's authoring.
That's right.
Your AI persona in there doing the work for you, and challenging you to kind of keep it, true to form and prolific enough.
Right, exactly.
In spite of its limited 32 books. Now, I'm told that William Shakespeare had a vocabulary of about 30,000 words. I don't know how accurate that is. Have you heard anything that?
No, I haven't heard anything about that.
Well, I'll check it out. Maybe some of the audience will check it out. Put something in the comments. So fascinating process, Kurt. And you've been at this for what, about 4 or 5 months at most?
Yeah, I'm an old timer now. 4 or 5.
Right? There you go. So what prompted me to do this episode with you was actually, it was your prompting, because most of my other episodes are really scripted. And when I watch them, they convey the points, but it's like, and the way you described it was like watching a tiger who was caged. I think a more appropriate or accurate metaphor is a kitty cat on a leash. But anyhow, you get the idea that it's so staid that you lose the vitality, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you.
Because I know you personally. I know this other side of you, right?
Yeah,
I want everybody to see this side of you.
Right. So the AI, when I had my AI persona, scanned off of me, however that's going to happen. Because that's one of the big things that's going on in the Hollywood strike, is that the actors are scared. Now they can basically scan you, and they have enough, of you. If they have enough material, they can basically create a synthetic actor.
Yeah.
And I certainly think, at least from my point of view, if you've copied me, I should be getting a royalty for that. And that's one of the legal quandaries.
I heard that was one of the avenues that some of the studios are pursuing, is doing a lump sum payout to celebrities for the rights for their persona for good, right?
In perpetuity. And I think that it's I'm siding with the actors on this point, saying, look, you want to use my persona? I want royalties. I don't want a lump sum payout, because it's shortchanging me.
But what are they going to do, Juan, when a teenager, and this is only about 2 years away, when a teenager at home is going to think, I want to see the Indiana Jones movie that I've always dreamed of. And sure, maybe I can't use Indiana, or maybe I just make it Indiana Jones. Who cares? or make it close enough to Indiana Jones so that nobody gets it, nobody can sue me. But then, and it will be rendered in cinema quality 90-minute movie. If you do that,
if you've used my facsimile, my contention is, and I side with the actors. If you're using Tom Cruise or George Harrison or any of these top-notch actors, Brad Pitt, you're copying them. They should get a royalty. Now, here's where it's really going to get interesting. Is what you've done is you've created a synthetic author.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the studios create an actor that's completely, AI, it doesn't exist in reality, that's a whole nother ballgame.
That's what I'm saying. So they're like, okay, so Harrison Ford, you're not going to sign this deal. Okay, well, Harrison Ford's career is over. We're gonna create Winston von Trapp, right? Vincent von Trapp is 80% Harrison Ford, just enough so that we can't get sued. And Harrison, enjoy your retirement's over.
And that's the gun to the actor's head, because
and it's inevitable. And also,
it is inevitable.
And these celebrities have a shelf life. I mean, nobody watches Meg Ryan anymore. I mean, given another generation, no one's going to know who these people are. So,
well, that happens to me all the time. I talk about people, old movies like Gone with the Wind or Casablanca, and these kids look at me and it's like, huh?
But the other thing is that we're no longer, and this is you opened this segment saying we were going to talk about some of the news that's out there. The news some of the news that I'm hearing that's out there is that cinema quality, feature length pictures, movies will be available for anyone to produce on their own, like Midjourney type of prompts to completed text. You can say, okay, I want some kid sitting in his room on a board on a Saturday night. You can say, I want the latest edition of Star Wars. Let's have Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and me.
Yeah. So basically, they create their own story.
Right. I'm gonna go make dinner. When I come back, I want to watch it, and that's going to be done.
Right.
No one's going to be going to Netflix anymore looking for the newest Hollywood production. That's done.
No, they won't. They'll be going to this portal that you could create your own story. And here's the next thing that's going to come in. You saw that thing with Apple and their AR set, right?
Yeah. Which
was like there's a lot of engineering in that. Apparently, there's all kinds of things going on. It's very sophisticated and it's expensive. But like anything in technology, they start off expensive, and then the costs come down and the prices go down. Now we basically can create our own reality and live it. You can probably have a force feed too. It's kind of like the Matrix, where you have this artificial reality, the story that you're living in. Which, by the way, I know that you study a lot of different philosophies, and you went through the Bible to kind of, look at that from a skeptic's point of view. In India, you go back 10,000 years, they basically said this is what we're living now, is that we are living in an artificial, this is what they call Maya. It's an illusion. And if you talk to a physicist, they collaborate with that. Remember that little article that I sent you with the quantum mechanics? And it's like they're realizing that that an electron is not, when you observe it, you can find it in one spot. But when you don't observe it, it's basically a cloud of probabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're experiencing everything from our sensory perception, I'm seeing you on screen. There's light coming off this screen. It's going into my eye. All right. So right off, it's light entering my eye. Mm. Then it hits my retina. It's actually upside down. And my brain does all this kind of function to create this image. And this is how, I'm perceiving you. Okay. But the reality is it's electrons. It's all photons, electrons. It's all energy that we're kind of processing in our little brain and coming out. And it's collaborative in that, if I touch a surface and you touch the same surface, it feels solid. But the reality of it is, it really is the solid. It's vibrating matter that resists my touch. So it's interesting. We're entering in a whole nother level of this illusion that's self-created now. The illusion that we experience in, and when you go out to the desert, I mean, there's nothing out there but nature. I mean, everything, and yeah, everything, your clothes maybe, but that's about it. Everything else is natural. It's basically the world around us. Whereas here, I'm looking in my room, this was a thought. This wall was a thought. This pattern was a thought, and somebody created it, materialized it, etc. But out in nature, the universe has basically created this whole magical scape that we exist in. So yeah, the actors are also in a very precarious position because they have a shelf life.
So I think a compelling question is, who isn't doomed? And I'm using the doomed, with
no, you're right. I mean, everybody. So today I was listening to Peter Diamandis.
Yeah, I like his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was talking about how they're able to reverse aging. And and part of that conversation is they found that basically every cell has a backup copy. And in that backup copy, you can throw the switch to basically have it be young again. So they're on the cusp of doing it. So we basically can do that. So what happens to all the health people and all that, all the aging creams and all that, there's that. Then there's doctors that, right now they're doing surgery but in the not too distant future, 10, 20 years, and that might even be a long time frame. It might be actually shorter because it's accelerating. They'll be able to diagnose whatever's wrong with you. An AI will be able to diagnose far better than a doctor does. It already does it with x-rays, by the way. X-ray imagery. It already can diagnose better, and spots.
By the way, when I said doomed, I meant jobs, not physically.
No. Yeah, no, we'll get to the Terminator scenario shortly. Hopefully it won't come to that, but there's.
So you just went through some interesting ones. So I'm going to use the word doomed to mean that your careers are doomed, right? So right. Doctors, they're doomed. We've already gotten Google. I think is it the MedPalm? Google can diagnose superior clinical diagnosis and superior scores on a bedside manner. So right. Doctors and then of course counselors. I don't know if you've ever tried to use ChatGPT as a counselor. It's incredible. And teachers, as some of these you mentioned when we led into this that we were talking about some of the news that's out there. One of the things that I found most intriguing was the idea that we have been able to scale humanity now. For example, the reason that doctors and teachers, we have to teach the way we do, and we see doctors the way we do, is that we can't scale medical professionals or scale teachers. We can't have a teacher.
That's by design.
Yeah.
Part of it is that the powers that be don't want a whole lot of doctors. They want to control the number.
Maybe that's the reason. But for now, we're going soon, and we already are. We're going to be able to have a physician that you can refer to on your phone. Likewise, we'll be able to have a teacher that you can refer to on your device as well. We can then scale those. So that, what does that do to those industries? So I'm very interested, one, in the question of how society is going to adapt to the coming paradigm shift, where so many jobs that were seemingly secure by virtue of the fact of the steep learning curve that it took to get there, are now the most vulnerable, because it's the janitor sweeping the floors that's probably going to be the last to go.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of advances in robotics. I'm going to jump over to that in just a second. But yes, this is the big question that's coming up, and this is the whole point.
The reason I said that was that knowledge. The reason I don't say that they won't go, but they'll be the last to go, because the first to go will be the intelligence, the jobs that are purely intelligence based, because we're already there. It's when we're going to have to, for the jobs that are more physical, like a carpenter, we're going to have to somehow join the intelligence to a robot of some sort, and that's going to take a little more time. That's what I meant when I said.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And for the longest time, people thought it was reverse. They thought anybody that's like a truck driver or does something repetitive task, they're going to be replaced first. And now it's the other way around, and people are starting. You're one of the people that's woken up and realized, whoa, this is where it's going. For you, I think you're going to exit in a way that before all this wave hits, but in the next 2 to 5 years, this is going to be rippling through, and all sorts of job categories are going to go down and going to disappear. But here's the interesting thing. Because of that, it's going to demonetize a lot of salaries. Salaries are going to go away because you can have an AI do it. And the conversation that I was listening to today,
what do we do with that, right?
Well, and this was Andrew Yang, the guy who ran for president, and he was an entrepreneur, and he basically said, we're on the cusp of entering an era of unimagined abundance, but to get there is going to be this really rough, turbulent period where jobs are lost and all. But behind that, everything will be done for you, and it'll be cheap, because automation will make things cheaper. It'll cost less. We're coming up on the energy curve where we're harnessing more energy. And once robotics comes in, we're going to harvest labor too. So all these components will come in. Now the question is, what do we do with our lives? And you've already got a head start on that with Going Alone. That whole series is like, you've questioned, what is my purpose in this universe that apparently once I'm gone, it's gone. We'll differ about what happens, when you leave your body. Let's put it that way. When your body ceases to function. But up to that point, I think you're spot on with the idea of what is the purpose of humans now?
One of the most eloquent descriptions of this problem that you've just described was summarized. I don't remember which of the current thinkers on AI was the one that said this, but he said,
Mo Gagat.
It wasn't Mo, it was another one. I can't remember who it was, but he said something to the effect that what we're going to be left with is what we do best, which is socializing, being together, enjoying the thrill of life, sharing, making families, memories, dancing, playing music, talking, all those things that are the core of humanity. And when he said that, I was like, wow, imagine a world where we're freed of all the dreary, laborious work, and we are on
the cusp of no longer have to worrying about survival. We do ourselves in, or create something and do ourselves in. But our survival, 10,000 years ago, we had to work really hard to survive. We don't have to do that anymore. So survival is out of the question. So now, how are we going to spend our time? And it's increasing because our lifespans are getting longer, and there's health here. I mean, you've always bugged me. I should talk about, longevity. And that's one of the other things that Peter Diamandis talks about. He has a whole website that's basically a book about what his program is for longevity. And it's
so what are you going to do with your freedom?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I want to spend time with the people that are important in my life.
I see you dancing and wearing
exactly. So I mean,
clothes
yeah. So enjoying good food, going out dancing, all those things that we want to do as human beings.
I had this talk with my last week with my 13-year-old nephew, and he and I were talking, and we were trying to talk about this. And I told him, Parker, when I was 13 years old, I was asked, what do I want to do for a living when I'm older? What do I want to be? I said, I think your generation, and I told him, 13 years old, you're probably the last one. You're in for a tough transition period here, because you're the last one that's being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? The question is probably going to change to, how do you want to spend your life?
Well,
right.
One of the things that's come up with a lot of people is that we're going to have to reinvent ourselves over time. And I'm trying to look at the where that came in, and as after I finish this up, I'll post links down below to some of the sources of these videos. But this was Yuval Harari, I think his name is. Yeah, Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote Homo Sapiens and Homo Deus, and he's got a few other books out. But he addresses this concern of like things are changing so fast that if you set out to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, you're going to have to reinvent what you do a lot quicker, a lot sooner. And from somebody, I've reinvented myself several times. I started my professional career as an industrial designer, which I loved, but life circumstances, etc. I evolved into doing graphic design, then web design, then user experience design. I did print design, and then came in where you met me. I was doing web design, and an opportunity came up to do project management, which I think is probably going to be one of the later careers to be targeted, but it's inevitable that it will be, because it requires so much human interaction. You can make a plan all you want, but at the end of the day, unless robots are executing it, you can't predict it. You're going to have to deal with all the variables that come into play, and that's the other thing I wanted to get into. Last week, Tesla released FSD 12. Now, for people that have been following Tesla, FSD stands for full self-driving, but it's been in beta in 11.10 dot something and 11 dot a bunch. But the real killer is, and Elon Musk was in this 45-minute drive, and he actually had to intervene at one point. So it's not 100% perfect yet. But the real killer was the earlier versions had all these lines of code, and I think it was like 3,000 lines of code that were like the rules that you had to follow. You had to stay on this side of the line, this, that, and the other. In version 12, they had taken all of that out, and it was all the neural net programming that they had, the machine learning that they had, and they just kept feeding it huge amounts of data, and it learned. Basically now it's self-taught. You don't need a rule saying that's a stop sign, and you need to, it basically will know because of all the data and experience. Like we learned to drive. You were a driving instructor. How did your students learn?
By by practicing over and over again until they got it right, just like riding a bicycle.
Right, and when they made a mistake, they were corrected. It pointed out, and that's what this system is basically built now. That when people are driving and they have to intervene, that's captured by the system. It's logged, and the system looks it over, and it's like, oh look, we've got 10 of these cases where, this happened. So now we need to change the rules, and they pump out an update, and it's changed.
There is a big difference that is worth pointing out, which is that when I was a driving instructor and I would meet little John, not little, so little, 15-and-a-half-year-old Johnny for his first lesson, and the AI didn't actually have to attend a single lesson. The lessons all were executed by all of the Teslas out there, the millions of Teslas out there, and all of the telemetry data that was fed to the AI to train it. It learned from everybody else. So basically it learned from other people's mistakes. Yeah.
Literally other people's mistakes.
And what's really astonishing about that then is that with me, once I was done with little Johnny, so to speak, and I would have to teach his 2 years later, I would teach his younger sister. Little sister had to start from scratch, right? She didn't have to start.
And had a whole different set of issues.
Right. Now, in the case of the AI, you just copy and paste the compressed file, and you can replicate that AI, that self-driving AI, as many times out as you want.
Right. And that's what's happening. So,
Yeah.
so what Tesla has done is they started off with radar and vision, and they realized radar, it's too much noise. Vision alone is enough. So it uses 8 cameras. Huh? It is for us, right? So it has 8 cameras, and that was the whole basis of it. Look, we have a neural system. We have 2 vision devices that are vision input, and everything else is processed by our brain and output by our hands and feet. So they use the same principle with the car, and other companies are pursuing with LiDAR, and and it's way complicated, and they have to pre-map everything. Whereas this, it learns. They could drop this AI, and if you haven't listened to this video, I'll have a link down in the thing. You should watch the drive, or at least somebody who's picked it up and give you the segments. It's astonishing because you can see that this car doesn't really need a map. You can drop it anywhere and say, I want to go, you give it a GPS point, I want to go here, and it might make a dead end somewhere, but it'll go back and find how to get there. Now, obviously with a map, it's more efficient. And obviously you use the map, it's used and basically say, here are the routes. It kind of does a little pre-work for it, but you can drop this system anywhere in the world and it will behave properly. And they're working on edge cases right now. At this point, as they say, the march of nines, 9.9999999% accurate. And it did it without all this rules. They basically realized all these other rules are unnecessary. And they've created enough, they have a backlog of data. So now what they're trying to do is build out their processing. They bought a bunch of these NVIDIA processors, but they've also created their own. So now with that other supercomputer that they're building, they'll be able to process the amount of data they have in an ordinarily short amount of time for the amount of data they're going to do. I mean, it's like several orders of magnitude data processing that they'll be able to do. So what that means is we're on the dawn of basically cars driving themselves. We're literally, I want to say, and I'm being really conservative, it's 2 years out. And I'm kind of factoring in some of the regulation that's going to come in because everybody's going to be skeptical. And, you see this news, oh, look, Tesla was involved in an accident, and the guy was killed using autopilot. Well, okay, duh. Autopilot, you're supposed to monitor, and you probably were texting, and, the autopilot didn't see the emergency vehicle, and boom, you slammed into it. Okay.
Well, the killer is going to be the fact that this information is everybody has their gut feeling about this, but you can boil it down to statistics and numbers and facts, right?
You already have. And that's the other thing. That's the other thing. Tesla is collecting all this. So you want to say, how many accidents have you been involved? Tesla already knows that. It has that. And they use that when they design their vehicles, and they're continuous. No, I don't want to use continuous improvement. That's a Toyota thing. It's constant improvement. They basically redesign their cars based on the data they've gotten on the crashes. So, we've had a side impact here. Here was the damage. They have this whole closed loop going on. And they just released their latest Model 3 refresh. They changed, this is an astonishing thing. They changed 50% of the parts. 50% of the car parts are now new. They've reduced the number of parts. They still have the same battery. They have the same motor, and the car has gained about 12 to 13% more range from improved aerodynamics and weight reduction.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So now the other thing is they're working on this humanoid robot, and there's this guy that I listened to, Connect the Dots, and I'll post a thing down there. And he talks about a friend of his who was in robotics, and his friend realized that it's game over, because what they've done with the car, and they put it in the humanoid robot. Now they've already got things where this thing can actually map out, and it'll see this is a computer, that's a table, and it knows it. You don't have to like feed it. They have enough data in there now, they can feed it, and it will know what they call an occupancy map. And it basically gives this how it sees the world, and it can move through the world. And some of the people that are on Dr. Know-It-All and his friend, and I'll have to put the name down. It's a a robotics expert that he constantly does podcast with. They were speculating that from what they saw in the very maybe a minute and a half of videos of this new humanoid robot, that it's already being used in the factory for like simple stuff, like grab this thing from the crate and put it over there. It's already doing useful work. And they've only been at it for what, 2 years. So, the whole point of my series has always been how fast things are changing and how are we going to adapt? I want people to basically wake up, smell the coffee, like the world is changing fast. You need to be aware of it. And it's important for you to start to think about how are you going to reinvent yourself to adapt in this world?
That's the part that I want to know. I want to know how people are going to adapt to the coming paradigm shift, to overuse that term.
Well, you've already started, Kurt. You basically saw this tool and you embraced it immediately. I mean, you took to it like, a dog to a bone. I mean, you were just right on it. And a lot of other
people, my work, I use it all day long at work now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I saw the template that you created for the project packet, and it was basically a charter that it sets up a business case. And we're hitting a time limit here, so we're going to have to wrap this discussion up. Unless you want to continue, I'll leave that to you. I don't want to take up too much of your time, or maybe we'll save this for another episode. But that's the thing. How are we going to reinvent ourselves with these new tools? Because this is just the beginning. Who knows what's down the road 10 years from now? And I'll throw out a little allegory. We went to a dinner down at Nick's down here in Pasadena, and they were busy, so we sat at the bar, and it's always fun sitting there because you meet people. And this guy next to me was, had like tats and long hair. He was a high school, elementary school teacher, high elementary school teacher. And I asked him, what do you think about ChatGPT? And he says, at first I thought I would be able to tell the difference because, a ninth grade person writing something and an AI writing something is, you can spot it right off the bat. And then he realized that with the right prompts, you can tell it right like a 9-year-old and make sure you include a few typos. And
try giving it a prompt to write like a non-native English speaker. It pulls it off perfectly.
Yeah. So he realized that was gone. And his solution, unfortunately, was, I'm going to make my kids all write their essays in the classroom. And in the back of my mind, I didn't blurt out what was in my mind, but it was like, that's the wrong answer, dude. Because
I agree, that's the wrong answer, and that's what so many teachers are in fact doing. I agree. We need to embrace this tool and change our educational system to find ways to measure, and not even really measure, because the measurement days are gone. Encourage people to find ways to enhance their life mission, or whatever makes them excited about being alive. Because that's the thing, right? It's not going to be about making a living in the future. It's going to be about what can you do to have meaning and purpose in life, and use this tool to enhance that.
Nails it right on the wall. So I certainly saw that we need to encourage kids to use this, but now, instead of just blindly dumping something in, dumping out, what are the right prompts? What are the right questions to ask?
Yeah.
If you have the Oracle, if you have, help Mr. Wizard, the guy that knows it all, what do you ask? It's like the genie. You rub the lamp on the genie. What are your 3 wishes?
Right. If I was a kid, if I was a teacher, I would be saying to my students, if I was allowed to within the structure of the system, saying, what is it that you're thrilled about the fact that you're alive and you're going to be here for, if you're lucky, maybe 6 decades or 7 decades? And why don't you go home? Your homework assignment is decide what that is and come back and show me how you might use the tools that are out there to further that in some way. I don't care what it is. Show me how you're going to do that.
And that is what we need to encourage, is basically think creatively have a
Yeah.
little critical thought, learn to understand what's real and what's not, because we're in the post-truth era. I mean, we can deep fakes and all the what's real now.
Stop training people to work in factories. Train them to be artists and poets and to love each other and to have fun. It's all hippie stuff, but it's what's coming, right?
It is what's coming. And let's face it,
the hippies are winning.
Yeah, the thing is that, you know, where the real money is now, it's in content production.
Yeah, but I'm thinking post that whole period. I know I'm getting myself into it. But
you're setting up the next episode beautifully, Kurt.
It is, because it's beyond earning a living, right? It's what makes you get up and want to enjoy life and feel like your time here was worthwhile.
Brilliant. This has been great. I want to do another one of these. Would you be up for it?
Of course, always. For you, anything.